morning on this last Wednesday of remote learning for most students if you're here listening from home. So welcome, and as I said before, if you're tuning in as a class, welcome to you and your teachers as well. So we've got a really exciting presentation today, and we've got a special guest from Gipps Dairy, and that's Sarah, and you'll meet her in a few moments. So just a few things we wanted to run by just before we make a start. I'm just going to click through. We want to do a formal acknowledgement of country. So we here at the CEAV respectfully acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging leaders who are following in the footsteps of those who came before, and we thank them for the opportunity to conduct CEAV business on their lands. Today's program is part of the Industry Immersion Experience. So this is a project that's been funded by the Department of Education and Training, and it aims to provide young people in years 7 to 10 and in VCAL with an opportunity to engage in a range of careers opportunities to learn more about your prospects for life after school and learn more about what's available to you. So obviously, with the restrictions around COVID, we haven't been able to run face-to-face excursions like we have in the past. So what we're doing today is bringing you information about the food and fibre industry, particularly working in dairy, and hopefully you'll be able to take away information that will be part of your career planning and your thought process and thinking about what you're interested in, where your skills are, and perhaps if a career in dairy is something that you'd like to learn more about and perhaps pursue in the future. We'd really like to thank the Department of Education and Training for allowing us to use WebEx to host today's presentation. So what are the main objectives? So we're going to learn a few things today, now 45 minutes or so together. You're going to hear from a food and fibre industry professional. So hearing from people working in different industry areas is the best way to learn about what you might be interested in, if it fits in with your skills. Maybe you might identify some things that you would like to improve on so you can work in a particular field. You'll learn about all the career opportunities available in dairy. So, you might have a perception of what working in dairy is. You might be from a regional or remote area and you've got a bit of an idea, or you might be from Metro Melbourne and you might think you know what the dairy industry is, but there's probably a lot more to it that you've never considered before. You're going to hear a little bit of labour market information. So that's about, why do we need people in these areas? How much money does the dairy industry bring to Australia and into Victoria? And as I said, you're going to hear about careers that are related to food and fibre. As Amelia mentioned, you can ask questions. So although your microphones and videos are off, we do encourage questions. So you can just type them in the chat box and I can ask our presenter along the way any questions that pop up, or we can ask at the end. So it's no problem at all. We want it to be interactive. So if there's something you really want to know about, feel free to pop it in the chat box. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, Sarah. Now she's the Regional Extension Officer from the Gipps Dairy, sorry. And she's here to talk to you today and provide you with lots of information. So enjoy the presentation. There's some beautiful visuals as well. So you're in for a real treat. And thank you, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Jen. Hi, everyone. I'll just start by apologising. I won't be looking into the camera as I'm doing the presentation. I'll be looking to the side because I'll be looking at a larger screen so that I can follow the presentation a little bit more easily. So thanks, everyone, for your time today. Just going to have a bit of a chat about careers in the dairy industry, as Jen has mentioned. I work for an organisation called Dairy Australia. Next slide, please, Jen. Dairy Australia is an Australia-wide body that helps look after the dairy industry, and the dairy industry is the 4th largest rural industry in Australia. Some of the areas that we focus on at Dairy Australia are research and development, and this might include new technology and the best ways to feed our cows, for example, and look at disease control as well. We look into education, such as roles that we're doing now. We have a trade and strategy team, which is, I find really interesting when they spoke to myself when I first joined the organisation, and they were talking about how some countries prefer their cheese to be more yellow or their cheese to be more white. So that depends on which breed of cow we might get our milk from that we send over to those particular countries. We have a marketing and a communications department. So they produce, a little bit down the line, we'll have a look at a careers brochure. So they produce materials such as our careers brochure. And our communications department, they will write articles for newspapers, might be your local newspaper, or some of you might have heard of or read the Weekly Times, some of our larger newspapers. And we also do a lot of work on sustainability, which is sustainability of both the environment, but also the sustainability of the dairy industry and how we can keep that operating. And as you can see from, oh, sorry, Jen.
Sorry.
As you can see from the map there, the dairy industry is primarily concentrated on the east coast of Australia and just a tiny little bit over concentrated around the south coast of Western Australia. So it's and a tiny little bit up near Cairns. It's very, very weather dependent and obviously likes good rainfall. Next slide, please, Jen. So Dairy Australia, as you can see there, is our overall body, and then we have 8 different divisions underneath that are in each state, or not quite in each state, but in Western Australia, New South Wales, Queensland, and then 3 divisions in Victoria, because we have so much dairy in Victoria, and 1 division in Tasmania. The Jen, if you could just hit the next. Yeah, thank you. So our organisation is made up of, we have a regional manager, we have our executive assistant and administration assistant. So in terms of roles in the dairy industry, their roles are to help us a lot with document preparation, help me prepare this presentation, for example. Then we have our regional extension officers, which is my role. We have 6 of those in our organisation. And then we have a comms and engagement officer who, as I mentioned before, do material for the dairy industry. So our comms and engagement officer will produce information to go on our social media pages, for example, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and I can't think of what else we use. They're the main ones. And they'll write some articles for our local newspapers. And we also produce some newsletters and things ourselves that we send out to farmers. And next, yeah, thank you. We also have a board that helps run Gipps Dairy, and our board is made up of 6 farmers and 3 specialist directors. So these specialists include people who work in industry and not necessarily on farm. So we have a bank manager, and he is on our board. He can just help keep the board aware of what's happening in the banking world, and whether it's easy to get a loan for farm equipment or whether things are going a bit tough, depending on seasonal conditions. We've got a vet that's on our board who can help provide a lot of research information on disease, what's happening with diseases and animal welfare in our regions. And we also have a lady who looks after genetics as well. So it's very handy to have all these specialists on our board. Next slide, please, Jen. So I'll talk a little bit about Gipps Dairy, which is the division of Dairy Australia that I work for. We can jump on to the next one. So with Gipps Dairy, we partner with a lot of groups of people such as dairy farmers, education and training, which include TAFEs and schools, some local organisations. We work a lot with a dairy youth group, for example, some industry organisations, research and development groups. There's a farm near us just known as Allenbank. It's in a little township of Allenbank, and they're a research farm. So they'll trial different types of feed for cows. They trial different temperatures, and they've got some really cute scratching posts and things that the cows can go up and scratch against to keep them nice and relaxed and happy in their environment. So that's an awesome place if you ever get to do an excursion out there. We also talk to industry groups with, as Jen mentioned before, Food and Fibre. So Food and Fibre Gippsland, we worked with them at Harvest Fest last year, which was a big expo that we had down here. We can go on to the next one, the next button, thanks. And if we keep going, please, Jen. So at Gipps Dairy, we aim to provide dairy farms with support about animal health and welfare, feed-based management. So feed-based refers to basically how to grow and cultivate suitable feed for dairy cows, animal nutrition, so that's more focused on what grain we should be feeding the cows and what type of grain we might want to feed them at different times of the year. Because, for example, when they're calving, as like pregnant humans, pregnant cows need additional nutrition and resources to help to grow healthy calves. Farm business management, which is pretty much doing all the bookwork to make sure that your farm business is running on track. Natural resource management, so that helps look at things, all your natural resources, water, management of soils, erosion, all of those types of things. And then we also look at career development and working with people, which I'll talk a little bit more about later as well. In my role at Gipps Dairy and Dairy Australia, we get to work with a lot of organisations. The farm I mentioned before at Allenbank, the research farm, that's actually run by Agriculture Victoria. Fonterra and Saputo, they're what we call dairy processors, which is where when the milk gets picked up from the farm by the milk tanker, it gets taken to a processor and processed either into liquid milk or powdered milk. We work with banks such as Rabobank. Rabobank is specifically for farmers, so they understand a lot more about the value of cows, farm machinery and dairy equipment. We run sessions on understanding finances, so we might go to Rabobank and ask for somebody there who can come and run a session for some people in our young dairy network to let them know what the banks might be looking for if they want to take a loan to get a tractor, for example. And the UDV is the United Dairy Farmers of Victoria organisation, and the Australian Dairy Conference. We have a big conference every year as well. So there's some groups we work with. Thanks, Jen. So my role at Gipps Dairy, I'm a Regional Extension Officer. My area of extension is specifically in relation to people. We also have other roles that would relate to animal nutrition, feed base, and the areas that we saw on the previous slide. So in my role, I look at attracting people to the dairy industry, doing presentations such as this, and also if people ask about traineeships, I'll link them up with a TAFE or an organisation that can administer their traineeship and try and find a farmer who would like to take on a trainee and create the match there. I assist with workforce development. So sometimes people might be struggling on a farm, not really getting along with their manager, or the manager might be thinking, oh, I'm not really sure why this person's not capable of doing this particular task. So part of our role is to go out and try and work out what might be happening in that organisation and just say to the farmer, this person needs a little bit more help. You need to explain to them a little bit more about what's going on. I look after the Young Dairy Network. So in Gippsland, we've got about 400 people that attend the Young Dairy Network, and that's for young farmers and people that are just getting into the industry. We have a lot of fun together. We'll organise social nights to catch up, or Christmas events such as barefoot bowling. And then we'll also organise technical nights where they'll come along and listen to a speaker about a topic that they're interested in. And the Young Dairy Network, they choose what topics they want to hear about. It's very much led and driven by the young farmers. And I also help farmers assist with their safety on farm. So we have, as I'll talk about in a minute, the dairy industry is very well resourced. So we've got a lot of information that can help farmers. We have a big farm safety manual. So I go out and speak to farmers and help them put in procedures and policies in place to try and keep their farms as safe as possible. Next slide, please, Jen. But I'll just talk a little bit about how I became an extension officer at Gipps Dairy, because it was actually a bit of a surprise to me when I got the role. I started out when I finished high school. I did a Bachelor of Education in Environmental Science. I originally enrolled in a Bachelor of Business and very quickly decided that wasn't for me. So in our second round offers, I applied for a Bachelor of Education in Environmental Science and got into that. While I was at uni, the education sector took a bit of a downturn and a lot of teachers were out of work, and my friends and I really debated whether we should stick with our course or not. And a lot of lecturers said, well, you've also got your environmental science major, so stick with your course, you're halfway through it, and then when you finish, see whether your career path takes you down the education side or the environmental side. Mine ended up taking me down the environmental side initially. When I finished my degree, it was 4 years, I sort of wanted to take a gap year, but didn't know what I wanted to do. I was working part-time in the hospitality industry. So I decided I'd do a diploma of environmental management. It was quite accessible for me. It was quite affordable. So I thought I'll take that on and see where that leads me. While I was doing that course, I actually met someone who was working for a dairy processor. So next slide, please, Jen. Next button. So I ended up, through that person, they told me that there was a job going at, it used to be called Bonlac, and now they've been bought out by a company called Fonterra. So there was a job going at Bonlac and for an environmental technologist, which was perfect for my diploma of environmental management and environmental science component of my degree. So I applied for that position and I worked at the dairy processor for 3 years. My role there started out as an environmental technologist working in the lab and doing a lot of really cool testing. Got to drive around to neighbours' properties with a noise monitor to make sure that we couldn't hear the factory too much from their properties. Some dust monitoring to make sure that the milk powder from the factory that was coming out the chimneys wasn't affecting their properties. And I got to measure different components of the waste that was coming out of the factory. So that was a really cool job. And then I also started getting involved in safety at the processing factory, meeting environmental requirements through the EPA and other organisations, and also started getting involved in quality and checking the quality of the milk that was coming through the factory. At the same time, I decided I would do my master's in environmental science. I've put that in italics because that didn't actually lead me any further with my career path. However, it was still a fantastic experience and absolutely worth doing, and has given me a lot of confidence in my position now, years down the track, because when people talk about sustainability and natural resource management, I've got a really good understanding of what they're talking about, even though I haven't actually ended up working in that field. So from my work at the dairy processor, I started doing some consulting work in my own business in the fields of quality and health and safety. And then the education sector was looking for teachers. So I thought, I might do a little bit of emergency teaching, CRT work along the side. So I did those 2 roles for a couple of years. And then one of the companies I was consulting to, I'd been working very closely with the human resources manager there. She left her position, and then that company offered me a position as a human resources manager. And that was actually in the automotive industry. So quite different to dairy and quite different to environmental science and teaching. I took on that role because I like trying new things, and I was there as a human resources manager for a few years. During that time, we also bought our own stock feed business. I had met my husband. Next button, please, Jen. I had met my husband, and he and his family had a stock feed business. So that's basically buying in grain, and we used to pick up a lot of waste product, pasta and lollies, a lot of waste product from food factories, mix it in with the grain, and then we would deliver that out to mainly dairy farms, but also a lot of piggeries and beef farms. When we had our own stock feed business, we also bought a dairy farm, which was my husband's dream. Their family had always been in farming. I still didn't know much about it other than working at the factory. And during that time, I had a couple of babies and had lots of nappies to be dealing with, but was also still working on the farm. When we sold our dairy farm a few years ago, I wasn't sure what field I wanted to get into, and I applied for a job at a first aid organisation. They were a registered training organisation, and I was doing a lot of enrolments into their first aid courses for them and assessing the first aid books that came back to the organisation. While I was at that job, a friend rang me and said, "Oh, we've got some work going at Gipps Dairy and they're really family friendly. Would you like to apply for a position here? Very flexible hours, very interesting job. You won't just be sitting at the desk all day like you are at the first aid organisation." So I applied for the job at Gipps Dairy, and I didn't actually know what an extension officer was before I applied for the job. So and I hadn't seen the ad because it was a friend that rang me. So they sent me the ad and a job description, and I thought, wow, it's not quite what I've done before, but it looks interesting. So I applied for the position, and I was lucky enough to get the position as an extension officer, which I absolutely love. And while I've been working as an extension officer, Gipps Dairy has also paid for me to do my Diploma of Human Resources in dairy, specialising in dairy. So that's been a fantastic experience for me. So what does that all mean in relation to my job? So I get to speak at careers expos, either online or in person, face-to-face. When we are doing face-to-face events and activities, I get to go out to high schools and primary schools, and I get to mentor students as well. We worked with a school in Maffra last year. I worked with 4 Year 9 girls on a particular project, which was heaps of fun. We get to run field days and workshops. So we have Job Skills Expo. We'll be maybe running some sessions on extracting DNA and genetic material from wheat. We did one year, so that was really exciting. I get to coordinate networking and social events, like I mentioned before, with the Young Dairy Network. We also run a tour to Tasmania each year, and unfortunately I didn't get to go this year because of COVID. So I've organised it the last few years, and this is the first year I was going to go, and then I wasn't able to. So fingers crossed for next year. And that would have been taking 14 young farmers aged between about 18 and 25 for a tour around Tassie. So that would have been really exciting. And I get to meet with lots of organisations, such as the ones I've discussed before about working with banks, milk processors and schools and so forth. Next slide, please. Why do I enjoy what I do? No, that's not me making cheese there, but I think that would be a really good activity to try as well. I like doing what I'm doing because every day is different. Some days we're in the office when we're able to do face-to-face activities. Some days we're on a farm. Some days we're running an event. Some events I run at night as well, so I might not work during the day. I might do an event that night instead. I get to meet lots and lots of new people, which is heaps of fun. And the dairy industry, particularly in Gippsland, where I've got my experience, everyone knows everyone. So you'll keep running into the same people again, and you get to form really good friendships and really understand what's going on in people's lives and in their dairy businesses. I mentioned before that I get lots of training and development opportunities for myself, such as the HR diploma, but I also get to help other people with their training and development as well. Everyone in the dairy industry is passionate about what they do. Most people don't get up and milk cows at 4 o'clock in the morning unless they really love it. And farmers also really love their cows. There's a lot of debate in social media about the treatment of animals, and farmers do really love their cows because it's a big investment, financial investment in cows. The better they look after the cows, the better the milk is that they produce, and they are working with those animals all day, every day. So they become their friends and they want them to be friendly and easy to work with. Working with animals is lots of fun, particularly the calves, although as I'll mention later, they're very cute, but they're also very difficult. We get to work outdoors. We get to work outdoors in the heat and the cold, and that's just part of the fun is that some days we'll all be rugged up and complaining about the cold, and then other days we're out there in shorts and T-shirts loving the sunshine. We also get to explore all around Victoria and across Australia. In an extension officer role, we spent a lot of time driving in our cars. We don't want farmers that are 3 or 4 hours away from the city to be excluded. So our role is well supported to be able to go down and see farmers that are in the more isolated areas. Next slide, please, Jen. So we'll just have a look at the broader Australian dairy industry and why we need people working in our industry. So across Australia, the dairy industry is a $13 billion industry, and that includes all the aspects of farming through to manufacturing and exporting. We're lucky with our dairy industry in that we use a lot of what we produce in Australia, which is great for keeping our jobs in Australia. And it's also really important, as we've just seen during COVID, where a lot of our imports were held up because of shipping restrictions and so forth. So a lot of the product that we make here is actually available for use here. So you can see that 35% of dairy product is exported and 65% stays in our country. Next slide, please. So these are some of the countries that we export to: China, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. We export to a lot of other countries too, but these are just our bigger countries. And as I mentioned before, there's different requirements for different countries. Some like the whiter cheese and the whiter milk. Some prefer the yellower tainted milk and cheese. A lot of the countries also, some of them like China, prefer powdered milk rather than liquid milk or cheese. And it's our trade and strategy team that are largely involved with the export market. If you're somebody that really likes numbers and analysing information, there are also roles such as analysts, and they look at the world prices and try to estimate for our farmers whether they're going to get what sort of milk price they're going to get the following season, whether it might be a little bit higher or lower. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next button. So we have over 5,000 dairy farms in Australia, which produce 4.4 billion litres of milk a year, which is a lot of milk. These statistics are a couple of years old because we haven't finished gathering all the data for this year. We have over 46,000 people involved in the dairy industry, nearly 1.5 million cows in Australia, and the average herd size is 276. So that means most farmers have on average between 250 and 300 cows that they're looking after. Next slide, please. So let's have a look at careers in the dairy industry. So there's lots of opportunities for people who want to build a career in a variety of fields, from a farmer to a field officer to an analyst, which I mentioned before, a researcher, a farm manager, right through to a business advisor. Next slide, please. We'll skip the video because on WebEx it's not displaying very well, but Jen will send the link to you later on for that. So reasons why it's a great idea to look for a career in dairy. There's a lot of progressive technology that's advancing the industry in world-leading practices. For example, we're looking at collars that cows can wear that track their movements. So you might have some cows that are down in a paddock, and if they're wearing a collar, it can send a message to the farmer's smartphone to let him know that that cow's been lying down a little bit too long and might not be well, so the farmer can go out and check on their cow. We're also using drones a lot to measure crops, and during COVID, when we couldn't go out on farm to help our farmers, a lot of farmers took drone footage of their crops and sent it in to us. There's a very big opportunity to create your wealth in dairy, and that can be through cows. Cows are very valuable, they're worth a lot of money. Can be through building plant and machinery such as tractors and other equipment for harvesting, and also through buying land as well. There's a big breadth of careers and opportunities and pathways, which we've discussed. Some of them we'll look at a bit further as we go along. It's a very well-supported industry, as I mentioned before. Farmers pay a levy, and then the government also matches that levy. So the levy is based on a percentage of the milk produced by farmers. Then the government matches that, and that enables the industry to have organisations such as Dairy Australia, Gipps Dairy, My Role, and the Farm Safety Manual that I mentioned before, so that all of these resources can help support our industry. One of the advantages of dairy is that they milk cows all year round. So there are some agricultural industries where the income is seasonal. It depends on the harvest and the fruit picking seasons, for example. So cows are milked all year round, so there's a consistent income. And we're producing something that feeds the world and also importantly feeds Australia, as we mentioned before. So now we'll start looking at a few courses and roles on and around farms. So this information is from a university, TAFE, up in northern Victoria in the Murray region. So they have about 60 students each year that graduate from their certificate 4 or their diploma or their advanced diploma in agribusiness, or that do an apprenticeship or a traineeship. So there's a lot of flexible learning now as well, so they can study online. So most of these students have a job once they graduate, and everybody is employed within 3 months, which is a fantastic employment rate. There's about this TAFE in Northern Victoria gets about 7 to 10 calls a week from employers looking for graduates, and I can also vouch for that in Gippsland. I get calls all the time from farmers looking for employees. Students can obtain work such as consultants, agronomists, farm managers and farm technicians from the courses that I've mentioned above. And starting salaries, if you have a qualification, are fairly good, about 65,000, and apparently someone came out and landed their graduating position at $80,000 a year. Yeah, not bad. And across Australia, there are about 6 to 8 jobs available per student. And as I just mentioned, I'm getting calls from farmers all the time looking for employees. Next slide, please, Jen. So some of the opportunities on farm are a milker, so milking the cows, a calf rearer. Calf rearer is a fairly specialised role. As I mentioned before, calves are cute, but they're also very difficult. They're very pushy. They want to be first into for a drink of milk, and so it can be a bit keep them under control a bit. But it's a very important role because calves also can get ill quite easily. So the calf rearer has to really be invested in looking after their calves, and good healthy calves also shape the future of the milking herd as well. So that's a really important and specialised role. You could also work as a farmhand, which might include milking and then going and feeding out the animals, or a bit of sowing and a bit of crop work. A senior farmhand, so that would involve some responsibilities of overseeing the farm operations. And then a farm manager would generally include the responsibilities of looking after the employees as well, not just the farm operations. So hopefully you like people if you're in a farm manager role. A share farmer is a setup where somebody might own the farm. You might have some cows yourself, and you might have some of your own equipment, and you'll say to the farm owner, well, how about we share this farm? This is what I can bring to our share agreement. And the farmer will say, well, I've got the milking shed and the paddocks, so that's my share. And then they split the income that comes in from the milk. An equity partner is where you might own a farm with somebody else, so you don't need quite as much money to invest if you're going shares with a business partner. Or you might also own a farm, might be something you've bought yourself or something that's been passed down from generations. Some off-farm career opportunities include an agronomist, and if you haven't heard of an agronomist before, that's somebody who looks after soils and crops on farms and other agricultural industries. A vet, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, a milk factory field officer. So milk factory field officers, they go out and visit farms, and they might do some quality checks, make sure that their dairy is nice and clean, and they will check that there's no bacteria or bugs in the milk that shouldn't be there. A dairy technician, they will work on the equipment that's either on farm. Farmers have a lot of equipment such as vats and their milking equipment, or they might work in a milk processor and maintain the equipment there. Nutritionist, we mentioned earlier on, which talks about the feed requirements for animals. You might want to be an irrigation technician if you're working on a farm in a fairly dry area where the land needs to be irrigated. Truck driver, a lot of you can be a truck driver, say, for a fertilizer company, or a milk tanker driver. And a milk tanker driver also includes some night work, so some people prefer the night shift. A farm consultant, they advise farmers on all sorts of things, bookwork and business side of it, just how to plan their business well and how to run their business. Soils technician varies a little bit from an agronomist. They might look at the components of a soil and talk about the quality of the soil that somebody's working with. A marketing manager, such as I mentioned before at Dairy Australia, or a marketing officer at Gipps Dairy, or a human resources advisor. There are some very big farms that have a lot of employees, and it gets a bit too hard for the farmer to try and keep a handle on what's happening with all of the employees as well as what's happening with the cows in the pasture. So they might employ somebody to look after the human resources on the farm. So we've got a brochure here. It's a bit hard to read on the screen, but Jen has a link and can send that out. And this is produced by Dairy Australia, and it just lists all the career streams in the different sectors, such as on-farm and off-farm, and then it mentions the training or the qualification that you need to do to...
Sarah, you've gone on mute.
Yep. Thank you.
That's okay. So just while we've paused, so there are opportunities at TAFE level as well as university level, which is a really great thing for students to be aware of. So as Sarah said, you went through university, but there is a way to get into the dairy industry via TAFE also.
Absolutely, and also through vet and VCAL courses at school, you can do a traineeship too. So if you want to do a traineeship through TAFE, generally, and it depends on the TAFE, but generally you'll spend up to 4 days a week on farm and 1 day a week at TAFE. And then if you're doing a traineeship through a school, you might spend 1 day a week on farm, 1 day a week at TAFE, and 3 days a week at school. So yeah, there's and you can even get onto a farm without having a TAFE qualification, but generally in that case you would need experience on a farm.
Yeah, or with excellent, thank you.
Yep. So in the dairy industry, a few of the reasons why we need more employees of the dairy industry is farms are requiring more specialist advisors. For example, people that know more about environmental sustainability and climate change to advise farmers on how best to utilise their land to preserve it for future generations. We need more skilled and specialised staff as regulations get tighter on things such as animal welfare and also employing people and the different records that need to be kept. So we need more specialised staff to keep track of those things. There's lots of opportunity to earn good money as a farm manager, herd manager, or an HR manager, anything where you're looking after people and all the animals together. There are fewer family farms around these days. A lot of farms are getting bought out, what we refer to as corporate farms. So it might be a company that buys 3 or 4 farms and then puts in a manager on each farm as well as some dairy staff. So that increases the opportunity for a wider range of roles. Next slide, please. So some of the thoughts that might pop into your head, hopefully, about working in the dairy industry is not needing to live in the city. It's a lovely regional lifestyle, particularly out where I live. So, and I'm only an hour from Melbourne. You don't have to live somewhere too isolated to be able to work in the dairy industry. Lots of people love getting paid to ride a motorbike or a quad bike and work with animals. With so many people working in the dairy industry, over 46,000, there's lots of different interesting careers that you could choose. The average salary for a farmhand, so this might be someone who doesn't have a qualification and is just starting out on a farm, is about $41,000 in your first year, and then that will grow each year as you gain more experience. The award wage rate for working on a farm increases based on your level of experience on the farm. The dairy industry is really well set up for, as we were saying, vocational training, such as your traineeship or tertiary options as well. And over at the last blue bubble there is you can do an ag traineeship and not end up with a HECS debt if that's one of your concerns. The other fantastic things about working on a farm is if you're someone like me and you like a lot of variation in your role, you can look for a role like an extension officer. So if you're someone who likes things to be the same so that you know what you're doing each day, then a role on farm such as milking or calf rearing could also be really good for you. So it suits different types of personalities, and people who like working outside might like an on-farm role. People who like working inside might prefer a research type of role. Just on the ag traineeship and not ending up with a HECS debt, for this year, and the government does it periodically, but for this year, agricultural TAFE courses have also been free. So every now and then you get the opportunity to study without any fees at all. And something else that's been really important with the dairy industry this year is because it's an essential industry, pretty much everyone in dairy has been fortunate enough to keep working through COVID, and that's been something that we've really noticed with the dairy industry. Is cows have to be milked 24/7, and so that's been great. And speaking of milking cows 24/7, even milking on Christmas Day can be fun with lots of Christmas hats for yourself and the cows, and so it can just be a great job all year round. And thank you very much, Jen.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. That was fantastic. So interesting. I mean, I know I didn't know a lot about the dairy industry until you started spoken, but just started speaking. But I was thinking about what kind of people might be interested in a job in dairy, and I've just jotted down a few things. So, as a student in the room, you might think of yourself as a really great communicator. And Sarah talked about those jobs that are working with people and promoting dairy, or working managing the farms, or those HR, human resources type roles, but also those hands on roles, working with the animals, or working on the land. If you're an outdoorsy person, if you don't mind an early morning and working out in the weather, it could also be a role for you. But it's interesting, I guess, people in the room who are really interested in science and technology. There's, I guess, lots of advancements. Would you agree with what's happening in the dairy industry, which with students who do have those skills and passions in science and tech, they could consider working in dairy as well?
Absolutely. There's lots of research positions available if you like that sort of work, and if you like if you're creative and you're trying to envisage what the future might look like on a farm. We're going to the virtual world a lot, not just with COVID and learning online, but also they're talking about virtual fencing for farms, and a lot of, so I'm not a very technologically based person, so virtual fencing is a whole new concept to me, but there might be kids out there who are right into all their technology and their virtual world, and might just love that.
Yeah, it's excellent. And would you suggest there's any particular subjects that students should consider towards the senior end of school that might tie in nicely with a career in dairy?
Yeah, so obviously if your school does agriculture, that's first pick. If they don't, then subjects such as the sciences, particularly biology as well. And if you are interested in more of a research type of role, then other science subjects. If you're interested in agronomy and soil technician, then potentially geography, and if your school offers horticulture, so that those science type of subjects. Yeah.
And I even thought maybe even vet animal studies as well, and
Yes.
and perhaps even like those kitchen hospitality, kitchen operations, even home economics,
Home
cooking
ec.
at
Yep.
school. Those
Yep.
type of subjects could be a nice link as well. So,
Yes, we actually have a role in Dairy Australia, which I forgot to mention before, and I can't remember the title of the role. However, it's someone who experiments with cooking, and we have actually the Dairy Australia head office is based at South Bank, and in our office building there is a kitchen, and the person works in the kitchen experimenting with all different recipes and things. So, and her path was home economics and into food technology, and then a role in the kitchen at Dairy Australia. Yeah.
oh, that's excellent. Thank you. We've just had one question come through. Where can students go to learn more about the different types of careers in the industry? Now, Sarah did show a brochure that had different courses. So what we will do, we'll pass that on to all the teachers that registered for today's event, so they can pass it on to students who participated. But is there a website, Sarah, or a particular part of your website that we can pop the link in, or we can send it out later if you can't think of it off the top of your head?
Yeah, I can't. There are some different places that students can go, so I will find out those links. But also, they can contact one of the regions, or ring Dairy Australia, or jump on the Dairy Australia website as well. Yeah.
Great.
And I'm happy to take calls from or emails from any students as well. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I guess one takeaway for me is that there's a lot of jobs, and for there to be 6 to 8 jobs per graduate, that is an amazing opportunity to know that you're going to finish a course and have work. If people are ringing from farms saying we need employees, that is a great prospect for any students who's considering maybe a career in the dairy industry. So thank you very much, Sarah, for sharing your career path, which wasn't straight and linear like some people's art. Mine is also very curvy. And I think it's really good for students to understand that you might end up working somewhere completely different to where you think you will be at the moment. And that's okay. We're likely to change our careers 5 to 7 times in our lifetime. So You'll try new things. You may not be sure what you want to do now. This is another little bit of information to take away and think a little bit more about and do a little bit more research. So thank you very much, Sarah. We will share extra links and details with all teachers who registered for the event to pass on to students. Now, I've just got a final little thing to run through with you, and that's regarding some online resources that we have to accompany the presentation today. So for any teachers in the room, you'll be able to access this via the CEAV website. Students, you can also access this via the CEAV website as well. I'll provide you with the details in a moment. So the resources, they have video links to careers in food and fibre. So there's actually some videos from Dairy Australia included as well, and it has interviews with people who are working in different jobs. There's also jobs in this particular booklet related to working in hospitality and some other different areas, working in hotels, and we accompany each video with a series of questions to get you thinking about, you know, what it is you are learning from these resources in the short little videos. We also have some fast facts in there, so more information about why you should consider a career in the food and fibre industry. It will also give you a chance to think about work experience. So work experience is something that most students probably didn't get the chance to undertake this year, but I'm really hopeful that in 2021, students will be able to get back out there and learn about jobs by being on site and having a chance to see if it really is what they thought it was going to be like when they go into different areas. You'll get a chance to have a look through the Job Outlook website and do a little bit more research there, which is a really fantastic resource. If you have not looked at Job Outlook, I really encourage all students to look through it. It's got so much information on so many jobs, not just food and fibre. Pretty much any job you can think of, there's information on Job Outlook all about how much money you can earn, where the jobs are, what kind of study and training you need to do to work in those particular jobs. So I'd encourage every single student in the room to have a look at Job Outlook. So we do have a booklet on food and fibre, but we have also the same booklet in many other industry areas. So if you're interested in construction technology, creative industries, maybe you're interested in the Defence Force, digital technology, international education, medical tech and pharmaceuticals, professional services, retail, transport, logistics and postal, the transport industry, and also visitor economy. So we have booklets in all of these different areas with lots and lots of video links, so you can hear from people working in these spaces and learn more about these jobs. Because I think with career planning, the more information you have, the better equipped you are to make choices along the way throughout school and after school, and the more confident you feel. Okay, and you can have conversations with your careers practitioners at school, with teachers, and even with people at home or other important people in your life. So take a look at these resources. They're free to access and they're really, really useful. So just finally, again, thanks to Sarah for participating, for presenting today, and thanks to my colleagues Amelia and Dave for helping out managing the chat in the room. We do have a short survey which we'd love you to complete if possible. It will only take you 45 seconds at most. Just a few questions on how you found the presentation and anything else you'd like us to include in the future. So thank you again to everybody who's taken time out of their Wednesday to join us this afternoon. And thanks again to Sarah. And we do have more of these webinars coming up. So we have a webinar coming up about careers in creative industries. That's in 2 weeks. And we'll be holding another webinar later in November, which we'll send information to your teachers about, regarding careers in construction technology with guest presenters from the Metro Tunnel. So the creative industries guest presenter is the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. So come along to those webinars, even if you don't really know what those industries are all about. Come along, have a listen, and you'll take away some valuable information. So thanks again, everybody. We finished at 11:54, so you can go and have some lunch, and